the last 12 years, being at the forefront of pushing boundaries and applying new innovation to help acquire new customers and retain those customers, right? It's really what it's all about. And I've got some examples of where we were yesterday and where we are today in the metaverse. And I've got a ton of slides, and we can divert if we want to. We can dive in, but I want to start. And Jackie, I'm not familiar with how to work this, so
the arrow.
Yeah. So we're going to look at horizons 1, 2, and 3, which are kind of near term, midterm, long term, right? And learnings from the days that we started SEMA, and even a little bit before that, Web 1.0, to the place that we are right now, which is Web 2.0, and Web 3.0, which is coming, which is all the new influx of technologies and tools, NFTs, blockchain, all the other stuff that's going to help set the course, not only for the web, which is not going to go away, but a new version of the web, which is the metaverse, right? And what we're all going to do. And that's really not said properly, but I've got a lot of validation from companies that I've worked for and worked with, and some of the industry standards that are out there. So just to get into it, I've got a daughter who's graduating from BU this weekend, and Boston University, and she wanted me to say she's the smartest and most fabulous girl ever, which I totally agree with. But there's this little thing that she tells me about her dates. It's like, Gabrielle, who are you dating now? It's like, well, I dated this guy. He's a 10, but he's got this thing going on or that thing going on. And within that vernacular, when the metaverse first came out, everybody thought it was cool, but you had this pushback. Why are the visuals like this? Why is this not happening? And why does it look so flat? And this dude, I haven't met Chris personally. I follow him online. He's very successful. He has a great point of view. He's exited a couple of very large companies, and some of his feelings are really spot on, but some are not. And this is one. And when you say, why do the graphics look like they're out of 1997? It's like, exactly. They're exactly like that. Because back in 97, the internet was like this big. And we were trying to do all of this stuff. Everybody knew in their head what we wanted to do, but we couldn't do it because the technology wouldn't line up. So we had things like this, which is something that I produced, was like a Rolling Stone magazine, where we had these interviews with bands, and you go and market or visit with a band and get their new song. You want to show it to people, but you couldn't show it online. You had to throw them a disc, like old AOL days, because those are where the big files were. And it's exactly what's happening today. So I think this is a really, really salient slide because it does a couple things. It talks about customer expectations. The phone that we carry every day, right, is guiding us, is pushing us. And these experiences that we have are not up to the standards yet of what we really are demanding, right? So what is going to do that? And when Mara gets up here and talks about AI, the transition to new worlds is happening, on an hourly basis. And that's what the early naysayers said about the metaverse, right? And they're still saying it. I saw something in Forbes last week around, is the metaverse going away? This is a slide that I put together. It talks about how we've grown since the early SEMA days, right? And I was in this space back way early, back when it was called multimedia. And as SEMA, as a group, before we filed the 501c3 stuff in 97, we had a huge debate around, is it interactive or is it multimedia, right? Because multimedia was the big buzzword back in the day. And so what it really stepped on was this whole kind of product first orientation, which is what the first generation, second generation of websites were. And then the third generation and moving forward started to turn the corner into customer first, right? And then now we're in this phase right here around Web 2.0, which is empowered by all of these, what were splinter technologies that were kind of siloed and standalone, and now they've become integrated, right? And Web 3.0, which is even more powerful tools that are coming to light, things like virtual try-on, right? How you can Warby Parker and try on glasses. Those are the types of customer engagement tools. How do you acquire and retain those customers? That's the way that this model is moving, right? And this, I mean, it started happening maybe a little bit earlier than this, but the innovation is moving us that way. You have to understand what the tools are so that you can market your product, service, or enterprise in the right way. Does that make sense? Are there any questions about any of this today? Because I really do want this to be an exchange. I don't really want it to be a presentation. So let's talk a little bit about this, the space that we're in right now. And I'm calling it the golden age of digital marketing, right? Back in the day, it was how these tools that were once siloed started to work together, right? And now those tools that are threaded by business unit, by accounting, by operations, by supply chain, how they're all coming together, right? And how you need as a marketer to understand that a little bit. You don't need to be really deep in the technology, but you have to understand all of that. And so to give you an idea and why I call, the beginning of this starting in 2010-ish to where we are today, this is the first organization of tools that was published by the MarTech group, MarTech industry group, that was in 2011. So there was a ton of confusion what was happening in the space by then, right? And now, but if you look at some of these players, and if you look at some of the areas, mobile marketing, creative optimization, video ad management, those are still in place, right? Now, but what was happening at this time was that there wasn't a lot of integration across all these factors or all these technologies. Today, instead of 150, and this just came out 2 weeks ago, that's where we are. Seriously. I mean, look at this. And I don't have, back in the day, my friend Jim over here, we've got a friend of ours that was a big media buyer at Sears. And he and I had this really great argument one day, which he always argues, he's a New York dude, about e-commerce never taking hold, right? And this is where we are today. And it's the organization and the splintering by differentiation, by tools, and by market, right? So when you talk about content or you talk about ad serving, and it's not like a lot of these have gone away, they've actually been acquired, right? So the mix, and if you look at Adobe still up there, you see Marin, you see, all these other tools that we know about, right? But the growth is crazy. And even more than that, everything is integrated. Hey, Hardy. And so it's integrated, differentiated, and everything is driven by specialty. So B2B, B2C, retail, hardware, whatever it needs to be. So that just gives you an idea of what's happening in our space today. And so you ask the consumer what is important to them today. And Salesforce has done that. And they said the brand experience is important, right? Everybody says that, right? And then you see other studies that Gartner says a consumer can't tell one experience from another. right? So think about that. You know, when you're inside of a headset, and just a quick show of hands, how many have tried to get into one of the metaverse experiences? Okay. So one thing that you'll notice is that it's a one size fits all, right? You go into an experience, I go into an experience, it doesn't know me. It doesn't know me the way that Amazon, Uber, name it, goes down. It's the same experience. That's not going to fly. It's just not going to fly, right? And then you start to layer on the fact that it's by brand, or it's by region, or by language, right? What the heck? So, you know, the differentiation is really important, and that's the opportunity from an agency standpoint as we look into Web 3.0 and for the metaverse too, to understand what the limitations are. And this is all about what Web 3.0 really is, right? And the metaverse, right? This is kind of where we are right now. You know, everything that's on your device or on a screen, it's height by width. But you start to layer in some of the new things like gesture, haptics, you know, facial recognition, and then AR, VR, XR, and the metaverse, right? And it gets the lines get a little blurry over here because right now they're just blurry. You know, you just don't know where the handoffs are. And we talked about omni-channel this and, you know, an experience that, you know, continues and travels throughout the customer journey. Well, those customer journeys are morphing, right? And so whether it's in, you know, you see smell up here or you see neural, you know, I was out at CES last year and this year, and you think that stuff is goofy and it's not going to come, but it's coming. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And those plugins to a site or to an experience that you experience either on your phone or in a headset is going to happen. So, you know, again, any questions right now? Yeah.
XR.
I'm sorry?
XR.
XR, extended reality.
Oh.
Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
So with all this new technology you're discussing, one of the concerns that's like always been on my mind, and I know it's on the mind of a lot of other people in the space, is how do we know if these technologies will be implemented ethically and not in the same sense of, like, let's say how social media was implemented within the last decade?
You should have been down listening to our conversation earlier.
I'll cover that later,
But
definitely.
you're absolutely right? Like yesterday's congressional, it wasn't a hearing, but a visit, right, by the leaders of AI. They were being progressive in coming forward about their concerns around just that, right? Versus Zuckerberg, which was called on the carpet by Congress around social, right? And we were talking too that, you know, having those standards in place as a creative person seems wrong. But it's like having a brand standard. Once you have those brand standards, once you have the guidelines in place, it gives you so much freedom to go wherever you want to. Instead of going everywhere, doing everything, right? It gives you the path forward, and it helps to kind of stiff arm all the bad stuff. And, you know, from an AI standpoint, that's definitely a deal. And, you know, the dark metaverse, the dark web, I think you have to think about that too, right? Still, there are no standards in place, and I'll talk about that in a sec, okay? So, in general, the metaverse is really real-time 3D based, right? And we see that, whether it's meetings or product displays or whatever. There are ways that engage the consumer, the customer, the business user in ways that haven't really been thought of before. And the business value coming out of that, that's where I play. So I'm definitely brand, I'm definitely creative. I want to do kick-ass killer stuff. it's got to be orchestrated with the right technology, but always with the brand, the business in mind. What is the value? How are we going to attract and retain consumers, or how are we going to drive, deeper employee engagement? How are we going to engage a workforce or train people better, right? And so this real-time 3D is really what is now inside of a glass. And there are many, many areas that are going to evolve, including this. Think about the first mobile phones and how big of a brick they were. That's what that is, right? The first headsets are like the early mobile phone. Technology is going to change. Prices are going to drop. And it's just going to happen. Somebody's going to come along with a better mousetrap, and it's just going to happen. And so, I'll talk about the business benefits, but the experience of driving a real-time 3D experience, or advantage of driving a real-time 3D experience, whether it's employee engagement, product offering, how you interact with that product, how you become one with the product more, is really intriguing. And it's like the early days of defining what digital brand standards were. And that's how Jackie and I met. I was putting in place the global digital brand standards for Citibank, right? Not the graphic standards, PMS colors and all that kind of stuff, but what interaction points were, where everything was on a screen, and everybody wants to figure that out second, but that's important to do. Those digital brand standards, whether it's for a product or a character that's inside of an engagement, all that stuff needs to be defined. Does that make sense?
Who are you seeing do this well now in the marketplace, or is dabbling in this now? Like, is there a brand you admire that has some of this 3D?
Well, that's such a great question. So the brands that are taking advantage of this right now are doing two things. One is they're accelerating their brand, right? They're capturing new customers and changing their brand, almost to the degree of what early .com products and services were. If you remember back in the late 90s, the pets.com that came out with the sock puppet, right? They had a huge brand presence only because they did it, right? And they were first to market in doing that. And so that mind share is in place. Coca-Cola is doing a lot. Nike is doing a great job. IKEA is moving down that path, right? And IKEA is interesting because those tools about taking a SKU number and overlaying that in your home setting to see how that piece is going to work or not work, that's one thing. One last point. What that stuff is doing is not only pushing their consumers into a mindset that brand is a leader, it's getting the leadership of that company to think differently, right? It's pivoting them. And it doesn't happen in the Midwest as often as it happens on the West Coast and on the East Coast, right? There's a more pragmatic viewpoint here in the Midwest. But leadership should be embracing this, right? In my opinion. And yes, I'm an advocate, maybe evangelist, but it's helping to pivot companies in new ways, not just from a brand experience, but from an employee experience standpoint. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to think about when Second Life came around and all the brands jumped in. And are there any lessons being learned and any comparisons at all?
I think Second Life is a good example, right? And one of the things that from Second Life and even from the early .com days is the fear of missing out, right? There was all of that. And so that's okay. I think that exploration is okay. Disney, about a month ago now, downsized their Metaverse team, right? That doesn't mean that they're walking away from the Metaverse. It means that their business model is changing a little bit. So instead of internalizing that team, they're going to look for partners to help do that type of work. So I think that there are ways to think about Second Life and some of the other things, not as a deterrent, but rather as a stepping stone. Does that make sense? Okay. Gage.
You actually answered a question that was put in online just by bringing that up. But another question was, Web3 seems so intertwined with blockchain. Can you go into that or just explain?
Blockchain and NFTs, right? More blockchain than NFTs at this point. But, you know, I think that that's where if you take the Web3 world and the Metaverse world, there's going to be some overlap, right? And blockchain is, you know, I think blockchain is a really cool way for finance to work, for insurance to work, right? And to help security issues that are always prevalent, right? I don't think it's going away. I think it's going to be, we're going to have to capitalize on it more. As we look to, like, we don't even know what the e-com or the Metaverse commerce, you know, MV commerce model is yet, right? But then how do you start to sell stuff? How does it flow all the way down? How does a product or service, we were doing a concert series in Saudi Arabia that was Metaverse simulcast, right? And it was kind of next generation, Alicia Keys, a lot of other bands were being lined up. And you and I could tag in for a concert, and through the digital twin experience, which is a whole different discussion that we could have, you could see the concert, interact with the band, interact with somebody else in the audience, and have the band interact with you, right? And because it's digital twin and subscription-based, if you will, you could pull up that concert anytime, right? And the band lineup is all world-class bands, and they were doing the same thing as like the LIV golf tournament or golf league and F1. They're just paying these artists tons of money to come over and put on this show, right? But that's the model. So how then do you sell stuff? How do you capitalize on it? How do you do a subscription model, right? And blockchain, not really NFTs, but blockchain is a big part of that. One of the other delineators between this world and early e-commerce is how flippin' complex it is, right? You don't just have the cool creative. It's got to be there for a purpose. And that purpose is, you know, obviously business focused, right? You know, and you're not just selling stuff. You have to have all the systems, all the platforms in place to serve up the right experience, to mitigate all the challenges, to collect all the data, and to sell all the stuff, right? And I've got an example of what an architecture is for a global airline that we were working through flight attendant and pilot training, right, in the Metaverse, and cabin training too, so cabin crew training. The business value in doing that is that those employees have a tighter community. They're all trained at a very high level. The churn, reducing the churn for those employees is different than what the business factors are here in the States for United or American. You know, those flight attendants get paid an astronomical amount of money, as do the pilots. And so you don't want to invest in that person only to have them leave after X amount of days or months or whatever, right? So there's a level of training, then there's a level of taking that brand experience and applying it to those workers so that they feel more connected with the company and with themselves. And then when they travel, give them the first rate travel experience of, okay, you're going from Saudi, Riyadh to Amsterdam. Here's what you do in Amsterdam, and we'll book this, this, and this for you, if that's what your crew wants. And then all the additional online training that you can do remotely without having to be tethered back to a physical facility, right? So all the systems that help to kind of drive that. So in the metaverse, there are a number of different ways to take all of this. And a lot of these areas are growing right now, both the industrial, the enterprise side, and the consumer side. And, you know, we're talking about AI, robotics, training, healthcare is a big, big area right now. So are areas like manufacturing and automotive when it comes to training, working with Mercedes around, you know, you open up an engine, you have a set of glasses on, you know, you work with a computer that's there. The service attendant is able to get to changing out a part more quickly because he's tethered and guided through what those experiences are. It's not just a productivity issue, it's a customer service issue, right? And improving all of that, right? So, and then, then on the consumer side, you know, you've heard a little bit about what a concert or a ball game might be, right? Think about, we were doing something for rugby, World Rugby, and how to tag into a world, like a World Cup for rugby. Put yourself in the stadium, right? But one of the advantages of doing something like that or an F1 race, and what's not in place today are advertising standards from which you start to draw metrics from, right? How successful is this campaign, that campaign? How do you personalize the message? None of that is in place yet for what we do. All of that spaghetti slide, which is not, it's really important. And I've got a slide to kind of compare and contrast to where we are today. It's just not there. So this is where brands and business is coming together. And the tools like Unity and Unreal, which are in front of this, AR3 kit, AR kit and 3 kit, which are two different products, are helping to do all this. And what it means to brands like Procter & Gamble, right, or Nike, and how you can try on different stuff. What it means from a design standpoint, using these tools virtually. Volvo has used the Unity platform to design this generation of cars that's coming out, right? Louis Vuitton they used to have a model of coming up with a new line of purses, and they would fly everybody in from all points globally, right? To look at new purses, new shoes, whatever. Everybody would disperse. 6 weeks later, they'd come back, right? How many cycles that would happen? Now they do it all through the same tools that they do by design, but virtually. It really cuts down product development time. There's the, all the carbon footprint side of everything that they're recognized very much more forward in Europe and the UK than what it is here. But that's really a leading component. In areas like that, if you think as a marketer, as a business person, how could you take these tools and apply them? That's what the cool part is. So I can get some of this. Here's, we've talked a little bit about some of the consumer brands that are out there. And I'm sure everybody has kind of read up and done some of their own. But these are the ones that I stick with. Yeah.
I'm just curious if there's certain analytic tools, either the same ones being used and new ones being developed that can measure whether it's flow state, whether it's the same like A/B testing or bounce rates. Like, is there any or just a lot of that pre-shopping behavior, and then when you're actually in the actual e-commerce flow, like are there? I'm just curious what kind of tools might be utilized, statistical analytics, or I'm just curious about like, how do you measure the success so that you know?
It's a brilliant question. How much time do we have left?
You have 15 minutes.
All right, so why don't I skip ahead a little bit because I want to answer that. And I've got a slide just for that, okay? So, a lot of companies are doing a lot of progressive things right now, right? And cost of entry is low. I know it's not inexpensive to do, but learnings are very high to drive this. And it's migrating leadership and business to see what is really in front of them, right? What this new world could be, right? So here's my point of view on where we are in the metaverse, right? And keep in mind the similarities between where we are in metaverse versus where we were in digital marketing, right? So H1, near-term stuff, 1 to 3 years. The metaverse H.2, 3 to 5 years, and then stuff that comes after that. And we know because of the model that's in front of us from an AI standpoint, how quickly everything is changing, right? One thing that is for certain is that today, enterprise is really taking the lead right now, right? From a employee training standpoint, service standpoint, a lot of consumer brands are jumping on, but those consumer brands are mostly luxury based, mostly at this point. There's some others. I mean, you saw Walmart up there, but for the most part, luxury tools and those that are trying to really differentiate themselves in the marketplace, that's what's happening. Then the fact that in H2, the integration of these disparate platforms are going to happen. Or, excuse me, I need a little bit of a drink. I'm not used to talking this much. So what that's going to mean is, more of this, more of these metrics that are coming into place, right? And then H3 is kind of the combination of taking digital twins, NFTs, all the other worlds, and combining them in these really progressive, aggressive ways. Okay? So, just to give you some ideas, market size by 2026, right? And you can see these studies all over the place. And the numbers may vary a little bit, but what is indisputable is that stuff is going to happen. And it's going to happen quickly. And so, whether it's revenues coming out of it, customer engagement, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, despite, what you hear in the trades sometimes, the stuff is going to happen. And so how does it go from where we are today to $1 trillion, in 7 years? What the heck? And what is the growth when, there hasn't been a lot of exposure. There are tons of questions. We have no governance in place, no regulation in place yet. Who's going to take charge? Just like we did with SEMA back in the day, right? It's a lot of that. And here, I'm just gonna get up to this slide. And I've got, Horizon. So this is where we are from a digital marketing standpoint. So remember the slide? Here's where we are from a metaverse standpoint. To get to that huge number in those years, the players are going to be a lot bigger, right? But it's not very big as it is now from a tool set standpoint and from an integration standpoint. And this is kind of a work in progress, and I'm sorry it's not as complete as what it probably could or should be. But you're talking about virtual reality. I'm astounded that in Adobe's summit 3 weeks ago, that there was very little talk about the metaverse. They talked about Firefly integration with Sensei, right? And what that means from a creative aspect. But Adobe's the player, right? And when they come out with an offering, it's very well thought through. The integration with all the other Adobe stacks, tools that they have is so smart. When Adobe jumps in, it's going to be really cool and big. But I'm surprised that they didn't do it at the last summit. It's going to be this fall, I would imagine, when they announce something. So, it's not a very big ecosystem at this point. And I can't believe that with all the growth that we have in front of us, that there aren't going to be new tools and new technologies that come up that we have to employ and be in front of. Okay? Yeah.
When you think about these brands that are in there now, and we think about the path to purchase, is it mostly that they're using it for engagement, consideration versus there's no commerce going on yet, right? Because unless they're utilizing NFTs, or is there actual commerce?
There is some commerce, but to your question, there are zero analytic tools. Well, I take that back. Unity has their own set of tools. Unreal does as well, but they're not really as mature as what a true marketer needs, right? We don't know about what those experiences are. Does that make sense? So it's very, very early. And so that, as a marketer, I'm as baffled by it too, right? So who's going to step in to help supply that? And when are the standards going to be developed from which we develop the metrics from?
And just one thing to add about VR is it's not necessarily a cakewalk to put on those goggles and know exactly how to use the controllers or everything. I guess if you're a gamer, yes, you're very well versed, but there's still probably an onboarding for, the average non-gamer to kind of just get even acclimated to that experience. The best way to do that.
Yeah, my own personal belief is that these monstrosities of headsets are going to move away. If you wear glasses, you're going to be able to put a little something on and it'll cast for you a similar, maybe not as rich of a vision, but those are the experiences that are being put in place by healthcare, the healthcare segment, right? Helping coach new surgeons to practice better, right? To be tethered back to somebody, right? So every industry, I think, is going to have different segmentation and utilization, and there's going to be early adopters and laggers in each of them, right? And, but, I think the next 2 years is going to be a remarkable change. So, yes.
So one of the reasons I think the web was successful is there was a World Wide Web Consortium. So basically they allowed people to sort of create an environment that was open, not proprietary. And by doing that, they succeeded. Do you think there should be a similar approach for the various metaverses that are out there?
I do. Well, it's one of the things, whether, you look at the environments up in this upper left-hand corner, Roblox, Sandbox, whatever, those are standalone. You can have an avatar today, but it's only for that one experience. It's not extensible, right? And that just doesn't make sense.
So what do you think is the best way to sort of create
I'm not a technologist, but I'd be totally down with helping doing that. I think a standardization does need to happen. And, back in the early days of the web 2.0, and then when mobile apps came along, and databases, it was all about having an open API, right? That was kind of what bridged the gap to everybody, and people were hesitant to open up whatever experience of that. So you would gate out a database, right, and only allow people in for this much. But now those open APIs are kind of a free-for-all. And that's, I think, the benefit of it all, right? Except for when you're talking about data privacy and all the stuff that you want to hold on to yourself. Does that make sense? But I'd be down with jumping in from a marketer's point of view to help figure that out. James.
Curious when you think the metaverse Web 3.0 extends beyond the device. Right now, we're saddled with experiencing it primarily through headsets, phones, even gloves, but
Cars.
when does it just become an encounter? When does it become the Blade Runner experience, where we just have the encounter on the street? We walk into an experience and it recognizes us and we can mold our experience without a single device.
Well, that was kind of what Beacon was all about back in the day, right? That you could walk into a place and it would know you and it would serve you up a coupon, right? But what you're talking about is more than that.
Yeah, it's beyond that even.
And so there are two things, in my opinion. One is, well, maybe more than that. One is the technology that's going to help to provide all of that, meaning bandwidth and stuff like that, that can serve up the right content at the right time to the right person, all the same personalization, customization stuff that Marketing 101 put in front of you, right? But how does it do that? I think the technology needs to be in place.
How does it
But,
recognize
and
that?
then what is that experience, right? And I think that's, as a marketer, if you're marketing Nike shoes or if you're marketing, H&M, right? A fast fashion group, here's what your likes are, here's what predictive modeling, boom, boom, boom. Why not? So, but I think to get to that, Jim, you have to have, I'm fortunate enough, I got fiber coming to my home and blazing speeds all over the place. And that affords you a lot of content that can be shared back and forth, right? Versus this digital magazine that I put together that everything had to be localized and then only ASCII files would be dropped back and forth. So is that, that's a bad answer for saying I don't really know.
Yeah, that could be your H4 there on your other
There you
side.
go.
Yeah.
Just riffing off that question, speaking about personalization, a lot of these social media platforms know us. And as we think about the evolution of Web3, talk about wallets and bringing cryptocurrency and Metaverse and Web3 together, who do you think is pioneering that space? Who do you think is going to win? That's so interesting to me because your wallet theoretically should be your sort of universal passport on the interwebs. And I don't know, I feel like no one's really rising to the occasion yet because there's too many individualized systems. So I just would love your perspective on that.
The big players right now in the space, even in AI, right, with Google, those are, it's hard to not factor those players in because of the muscle that they have. Microsoft, Meta, when they changed their name, some thought it was a misstep. That I'm not one of them. I think that technology will help them catch up, and when they do catch up, it'll be a player. I think that there are technology platforms that are going to take the lead because I think that needs to happen. But I also believe that a lot of the governance needs to occur too. Again, building the guardrails from which we can bounce across and create, right? Create the right way, right? So anyway, I'll leave you with this, I still really, really like this. When people start to say, why does it look the way that it does? And it's like, exactly, right? Because there's this hockey stick-like growth curve. And we're just at the beginning. And, people that are pushing back, I don't think they have the perspective and the understanding of knowing that there's going to be a tremendous amount of growth. And personally, I don't think the sky is falling. I think we're right at the beginning of all this cool stuff. And I'm really happy to be a part of it, still standing after, all these years, and drawing some perspective from my early days helping to lead SEMA. So, so there's my little avatar, and it's one of them, and it's grounded because that's my boy knowing me at a concert. But I'm all about SEMA. I really thank you guys for inviting me. It's been a big part of my life since way too long ago, and I'd love to help you all out. If you have any questions, hit me up, whether it's on LinkedIn or around here. So really appreciate you.
Quick change here. All right. Next is AI, switching gears, but somewhat related. Mara Schneider is with us, and she's the Group Director of Performance Media at GRP. GRP is an independent media management agency based here in Chicago. They work across a variety of verticals, including finance, CPG, energy, and healthcare. So, thank you.
Great to be here, everyone. I'm going to use the mic just so you can hear me in the back of the room there. What I first wanted to do is
It's on the bottom, I think.
What?
The bottom.
You hold it down, there's a green light that comes up.
We can talk about AI, but we can't give you my microphone. Here, let me play this a second. Okay. All right.
might need some help here.
Do you know how to work this, Jess? None of us do. We might have to start without it and then see if we can.
That's okay. I mean, I can use this mic here.
We might have to get another one, so.
Oh, you think it ran out of batteries?
Yeah.
That one just
What
needs to
about
be
this one?
connected right there.
Is this
Just
one?
I think it's-
No.
We can hear you above though,
Oh, is that a mic?
at least on my.
Yeah, it's a mic up there.
Okay.
The green.
Well, I can just talk loud. Can you guys hear me? All right, good. Well, let's just move on here without the mic. What I wanted to do first is have you all go on to YouTube right now. And I want you to search for The Great Gatsby or something called Pepperoni Hug Spot. Okay, either one of those. And if you don't want to do it now, do it later. But this is, what's really interesting is this is completely an AI generated advertisement, a video that was created. And this is The Great Gatsby is a, trailer for a fictional movie based on The Great Gatsby. And then Pepperoni Hug Spot is a spot that was created for a fictional pizza place. So what we're seeing now is a lot of experimentation, especially with video.
It works.
Oh, it works now. Great, thank you. A lot of experimentation, and so one of the things that is going to be interesting in the months and years to come is that AI is generating a lot of things, including these ads, these fictional ads. But there are regulations, and I'm going to get into that a little bit further on in the presentation. A large agency, BBDO, just announced that they don't want any of their creative people or anyone internally using AI to create commercials like this for any of their clients because they could get in trouble legally. So a lot of regulations are needed, I believe, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. So what I'm going to go through today is the AR journey. Where are we now? Who is at the forefront of ad tech? What the search race is and how it is speeding up faster than anyone can even keep up with. I wrote this presentation and did some tweaks on it, today, and I would say in about an hour, it's probably going to be obsolete because it is literally moving so fast. What we are going to watch out for in terms of regulations and things like that, and governance. And then lastly, what to expect. So what have we been seeing out in the press these days? Anyone goes into their feed and you're gonna start seeing things like this. And it is getting a little out of hand. I mean, look at this. AI could rebuild the middle class or it could be used to kill. People are using ChatGPT in place of therapy? What do mental health experts think? Here, playing with fire, how to adapt to the new realities of AI. I mean, you'd really think there was a robot zombie apocalypse right outside your door. I mean, there's fire going on in the background there. Life and death decisions are being made by AI. Here's another great one. The incoming tidal wave of AI deceit. And this one, I think this one is the most realistic I have on this right now, is about a company that I think is going to be one of the first casualties of AI and ChatGPT, and that is Chegg. And I'm sure all of you guys know about Chegg, right? I'm sure you all use it. But the CEO of Chegg just announced that they're in trouble and they're not going to make their earnings statements. Because why would you pay for Chegg if you can just use ChatGPT, right? I mean, all of you students are like, yeah, I'm not gonna pay for that. But the real question is, this is what you all wanna know. ChatGPT and job security, is AI coming for your job? Are you guys gonna be able to get a job? Is AI just gonna take over? Or these AI-powered tools can help make your job easier, right? Is it just gonna make your job easier? Are you gonna be more efficient at what you're gonna be able to do using these tools? So we're gonna get into that later, but I know that's all on your minds. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start out with where we were with AI and where we're going with AI, because I think this is important to get some historical here, because all of this news coming out in the press and everyone's getting a lot of anxiety about what's going on. But it's important to know that there are different types of AI, and this is very simplistic, but at the bottom here you see machine learning. Machine learning has been around for a long time, and I'm in ad tech, work in advertising, I work with Google, I work with Microsoft, I work with Facebook, Meta, everyone. Machine learning has always been a part of what we've been doing, especially in the advent of programmatic advertising. And this is a bunch of algorithms that are gonna make your advertising campaigns work better, more efficiently, and more effective. So that has already been happening, and machine learning is not only in ad tech, as I'm gonna show later on, but many different other industries as well. So where we are now is generative AI, and that's what ChatGPT is. That's what Bard is. That's what all these tools are generative AI. and they're built on LLMs or large language models. And each of the 3 big tech companies have their own large learning models. And it takes, I can't even tell you, terabytes of data, and it's synthesizing it, and a lot of people say it's just a very intuitive autocorrect, right? Because it's taking everything it's learned and it's predicting what they think the next word in that sentence is going to be. Okay, so it's gathering data from all sorts of different sources. It's gathering data from Reddit. It's gathering data from Twitter. It's gathering data from everything ever put up on Wikipedia. So just a huge amount of data going into generative AI. And I'm sure all of you have been on ChatGPT. If you haven't already, I would recommend you go there and just check it out. Just try it out. Ask it a question. I asked it, what could make my life more fulfilling? And it gave me a pretty good answer.
I'm very curious.
Okay, so the next step here is AGI, and that's artificial general intelligence. Now, a lot of scientists are arguing, well, machine learning is not really AI, and generative AI is not really AI. AI is really AGI, artificial general intelligence, which means it's a sentient being. It has its own thoughts. It can learn from itself, and you don't have to necessarily program it. So that is really what they're arguing AGI is. And AGI is, depending on what you read, not going to happen anytime soon. Some say it's 5 years away. Some say it's 10 years away. Some say it's never going to happen. So there's no use getting, all worked up about AGI. We don't even know if that's going to happen anytime soon. Let's move on here. What I wanted to show you was machine learning and the fact that it is integrated in a lot of what we do and a lot of companies that we work with, not only in ad tech where I work, but also in fintech and health tech or med tech. Now we work with a company called Abbott. They manufacture that Freestyle Libre that you see on the top there with the butterfly. And then we also work with a fintech company as well. And all of that machine learning through algorithms is integrated into all of the different tools that these particular verticals use. I mean, PayPal uses it, and all of these different healthcare companies use it. Epic, I don't know if anyone uses MyChart for their healthcare. Epic is the company that created that, and it's also the one that holds all of your data. And they use machine learning as well to give you recommendations on health appointments coming up, or you should, come in for a medical treatment that you need to do on a regular basis. So all of this is machine learning, and it really is in everything. I think touches all of us in some way every day. And if you still don't believe me that we're working with AI and machine learning, this was a report that came out by McKinsey just recently, and it was talking about AI capabilities embedded in organizations in the past 5 years. And you can see that capabilities have increased year over year, and they survey thousands of different organizations. Now, I kind of had I would say just it went to its peak and then it kind of tapered off there, but that only goes until 2022. So 2023, of course, it's going to start going up again. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about too, in terms of machine learning is, because I work with in ad tech every day, and one of the things I've learned is that it's not always perfect. And I think many of you have tried ChatGPT and did experiments, asked it questions. Sometimes it doesn't get it right. And a lot of the automation that I work with every day in ad tech, programmatic, Google Ads, all of those different platforms, is the machine learning doesn't always get it right. Sometimes it gets it wrong, and we have to be there to make sure that we're correcting those mistakes. So one of the things I wanted to leave you with is that human oversight is so important in anything automation and anything machine learning, and as we go into generative AI and beyond, is that human oversight is pretty much essential. You can't just let the machine do everything because it's not always going to get it right. So I want to talk a little bit about who's at the forefront of AI and LLMs, these large language models. So everyone knows Google, DeepMind. They've been working in AI for many years. They're definitely at the forefront. Microsoft is another one. That's with their acquisition of OpenAI and GPT-4, which is powering ChatGPT right now. And then Meta as well has an AI division. But this one I thought was hilarious. This is Meta's LLM. It's called Llama.
Of course.
I thought that was hilarious when I was doing my research. So Google has Palm 2. Now, Google just announced last week at their I/O conference, which is their developers conference, and they introduced Palm 2. And Palm 2 is the LLM that they're using to power Bard. And I'm not sure if you I'm not sure if anyone has played with Bard or, you know, in terms of ChatGPT 2, but they are really head to head. The race is on between Google and Microsoft, and it's getting pretty serious. Google just announced that Bard is now being powered by Palm 2, which is probably even a larger and more sophisticated LLM than GPT-4. So if you want to try out Bard, I tried it out weeks ago. It was okay. I like ChatGPT. I thought it was better. But now I go back and I try Bard again, and it is far and away above whatever it was before. So they have really upped their game here. Let's talk a little bit about the search race, because everyone was saying that generative AI and these large language models, GPT-4, were going to be a Google killer, especially because Microsoft had a huge minority stake in GPT-4 and ChatGPT. But Google's coming from behind it, and they are catching up rapidly, like I said. But search as we know it is going to change. And so both of these LLMs are now integrated or will be integrated into your search results. So we rely on Google. I mean, they have 90+% of all worldwide searches right now that have access to Google. It's outside of China. So they have a huge responsibility to everyone that uses it every day, right? So they've been very cautious about bringing this out. They weren't off to the races like Bing is, like Microsoft is with their browsers and GPT-4 and ChatGPT, because I really don't think Microsoft has anything to lose. Google has everything to lose, right?
Yeah.
So Microsoft can be aggressive. They can come out with this and then they have to wait until Google catches up. But Google is catching up. And they just showed this preview at their developers conference last week about how it's going to look in the future. Search is going to look. And they did this example of looking for commuter bikes, like e-bikes. And so the shopping ads would show up first, but then underneath would be Bard's answer, which was, when you're choosing a commuter bike, you should consider aspects like blah, blah, blah. And it had a whole different, bullet points of all the different things you should be looking for when you're buying or purchasing a bike. So Google has to really weigh the advertisers that already pay all this money to run on Google Ads, which is how you run ads in Google, with their shareholders that are going, well, wait a second, you guys better catch up to Bing, you better catch up to Microsoft, you're gonna be left behind. So it is something that I think is internally gonna be very hard for them to do, but they've gotta take tiny steps forward, and they are. It's just gonna take a little bit longer, I think, to do it right. And they don't wanna mess up, because if they mess up, people are not gonna, they're gonna lose all that search traffic they've been so reliant upon. So this is just a little glimpse of the future. Now, Bing and Edge are gonna have ChatGPT integrated, but it's gonna show up on the right-hand side here. They did an example of looking at most influential Mexican artists, and so they had this list, and then ChatGPT would have the answers on the right-hand side, so it's kind of a split screen. Now this is on a desktop. Think about what it's gonna look like on mobile. It's gonna be very interesting to see what's gonna happen. All right, what to watch out for? So, legal ramifications. I don't think it's fair that we get all of these answers when you go on ChatGPT or on Bard, and it doesn't tell you where they get them from. Where did they come from? Did it come from Wikipedia? Did it come from Reddit? Did it come from some random post that someone did on Twitter? I mean, who knows where it comes from? I think disclosure is so important. So that is something that I would hope that they can put and enable in their systems, because I want to know what the sources are so that I can go and check out those sources to make sure they're correct. Copyright laws. If ChatGPT or Bard is getting this information from stuff that's already been written by people who were paid to write it, like journalists, isn't that going to be a problem? Right? You're stealing my stuff. And if people are using it on a regular basis, the copywriting laws could be infringed. And then intellectual property rights. That all comes part and parcel with legal complications. And like I said before, with BBDO, they were telling their creative teams, you can't even use it to generate video because we could get in trouble legally and our clients could get in trouble legally. In the arts, I mean, everyone knows what's happening right now with the Hollywood Writers Guild, right? So they're all on strike. Part of their contract they're trying to negotiate includes AI. So they want to get compensated if any of these companies are using AI to generate any of the creative and movies, trailers, whatever you have. So giving credit where credit is due, the question is, if AI creates artwork, is it really art? That's a huge question to ponder. Misinformation and disinformation. So if this gets into the wrong hands, we're gonna have even more of a problem. It's gonna become more prolific. There's gonna be more volume of it too, because it's so automatically generated. In governance, that's another big part of it. So Sam Altman was on Capitol Hill this week, meeting with lawmakers. He's coming out and saying, hey, we want you guys to regulate this. This is really important for us moving forward to make sure it doesn't get out of hand. And I completely agree with that. There needs to be some sort of governance. There's so many different types of AI, they're gonna have a hard time putting together something. But I know they already have something in place that the Biden administration is working on. And finally, like I said, human oversight. So that is definitely needed, especially in highly regulated industries. So the slides I was showing you before, med tech and also fintech, Those are highly regulated agencies. If you get in trouble with FINRA, that's a big deal. So they have to be very careful. When we run ads for any of our fintech or medtech companies, we can't put anything on there that's automated. So Google will say, I'm gonna suggest you run this in your ad or put this image in your ad. And we can't do that. We have to we have to turn it off, because if anything gets generated and it hasn't gone through compliance and those attorneys haven't given approval on those ads, they can get in big trouble. So here's what I think, just short-term and long-term for AI, and then mostly generative AI is what I'm talking about here. Short-term, generative AI, ChatGPT, Bard will be integrated into the apps and the features that you use every day. So interesting statistic that I read was that Microsoft has not really increased any of their search traffic. I think it's increased by maybe 0.25%, which is crazy. Everyone's going to ChatGPT, they're not even using Bing, even though it's integrated into the search. So what they're doing now is they're gonna integrate all of those tools into search, into Gmail, into Google Sheets, into Google Docs. So it's gonna make it more easy for you to, access those tools within the tools that you already use, right? So one of the things they introduced was, help me write an email. So in Gmail, it will eventually say, hey, do you want me to help you write this email? And it'll actually write the email for you. And then you would just need to edit it. Hopefully you edit it before you send it out. Also, Microsoft's doing the same thing. Excel, Word, PowerPoint. Wouldn't it be great to go into Excel and say, hey, can you pivot this data set for me and show it with this X and Y axis? I mean, that would be incredible, not to have to manually do pivot tables anymore. Firefly, Curt was talking about that, so Adobe Firefly. Duolingo is already putting it into their language learning app, which is kind of cool. Help you learn a new language. And then Khan Academy also has an AI tutor. So it'll actually help you learn, but it won't tell you the answer. So it'll say, hey, how would you solve for this? And then if you say, well, I don't know, can you tell me the answer? It'll be like, well, maybe you should try this. So it won't give you the answer. It'll help you find the answer. In the long term, generative AI will become a commodity, really. It'll be ubiquitous. It'll be in everything that you guys use on a regular basis. And it'll be expected. You'll open something up and you'll go, why isn't the AI helping me? How come it's not helping me get an answer here? I think people are gonna start to expect it to be, it's gonna be an everyday thing. And it's gonna be a barrier to entry. Anything you work with, a new app, a new program, you're gonna expect AI to be integrated within it. All right, finally, do you think that AI will replace my job? I don't think so. I think it's gonna be more of a symbiotic relationship. And this is the first thing that came to my mind, Iron Man and Jarvis. I mean, they work together, right? He's the mastermind and Jarvis is helping him put his plans together and giving the information that he needs. So I really think human and machine are gonna be working together. And finally, I'll leave with you 3 parting thoughts. The first one is human oversight, not an option. Regulation is needed. And finally, embrace it. Test it out, play with it, find out if it works for you, because it really is a wonderful tool, and we're embarking on a huge change in everything that we do, I think, in the next couple of years. So it's an exciting time. Thank you.
Questions?
Questions?
Yes.
Questions?
Yes, for Curt and Mara, and Gage will, those that are virtual online, Gage will monitor the online chat for questions and then in the room too. So, any questions for Mara? Questions, comments?
So that's gonna be a little bit of a complex question, but as you mentioned, because these AI models are learning from previous data that's being fed, and like it's not exactly reference or site checking where those data is coming from. From a national security standpoint, what's to stop, like say, China or Russia from feeding our AI models bad data and creating outputs that are favorable to them and that could be potentially threatening to our national security?
So you're saying that China, for example, could populate the information internally in their country with their own language LLMs and then be able to, have, I don't know.
Have this information.
They would have ownership over that information, is that what you're saying, and manipulate that information?
Correct. I'm thinking about it in
Yeah.
the same sense as, with social media and with foreign actors sending misinformation, particularly during election times in our country. And I'm just thinking, like, would that just not be such a bigger issue when AI starts to take place and when it starts to start generating all these models from our data?
Yeah, I think that's a huge issue. Yeah, I think you're right on about that.
A question from online. Do you think that companies will hire experts or just sort of start expecting everybody to be tinkering and have like a general knowledge?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's gonna be a little of both. Because companies, I think, are gonna expect people to be able to use the tools and know how to use them. But then I also think there are so many jobs that are gonna be created that people haven't even thought of yet. One of them is a prompt engineer.
Right.
So now you get paid to come up with prompts to put into these LLMs. I mean, that's a new job. No one ever thought we would even have that job.
In my business, I'm receiving solicitations to sell us prompts. They're prompt curators, and
Right.
we have 49,000 prompts prepared for you, virus.
Yeah.
It's a new.
That's true. And I think it also will just make everything that we do in terms of our jobs more efficient. We used it the other day. My team and I were doing keyword research for a client, and we ended up just asking ChatGPT to pick all the keywords off of a URL that we're gonna be sending traffic to. And boom, there was our list. Then we had to do 5 other things to it, but still, like, that's how we started that project, is using AI, and it's making us more efficient.
Could I ask a follow-up question to that? We're in a university setting. Should universities, I had this discussion with the dean of my alma
Yes.
mater, should universities be teaching
Yes.
these things right now?
In my class,
Preparing
we are.
young people? No, I'm serious.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be out there. And I had a professor ask me this week, Jackie, what tools do you use to detect if someone's using AI? And I said, I'm not using tools, I'm giving it to the students to use in class, If this is where the world's going, it should be in our best interest to move with it.
I agree. And even if you were to use like GPT-0, which is that program that's supposed to detect whether you use
And it's not
ChatGPT,
good.
I don't think it's accurate.
Right.
Do you have an idea of when, we'll be mixing, I guess you could say, like biology and technology to create like a actual being, or like a robot, let's say, that can like be with us, and kind of, I wouldn't say a pet, but I would say more like a, just a helpful tool that we can use on the go. Like, hey, what do I got on the calendar today? Boom, like a friend.
Yeah, you saw the movie Her, right?
I actually did.
Okay, so my answer to that would be,
Megan.
how come Siri and Alexa aren't that intuitive as ChatGPT or Bard? Like, I should be able to ask them anything and they can answer me. So I think tools like that will just become better. So once Siri is integrated with these large language models, that's gonna mean Siri's gonna be so much more helpful to you. It's gonna give you more intuitive answers.
So like, my question is like, when do you think that we'll see it in a body?
See it in like
In a body?
either a robot, I think you mean a robot.
Right, like let's say pig scan, if that's what they want to develop it with or whatever.
I don't know when, but yeah, that could definitely happen. Yes.
So, I'm thinking about the evolution to AGI, and you said that there are some people that think that that's not possible, some people think it could be here in 5 years. And I think to myself, I'm like, all right, well, I would love to know more about why it's not possible. If it happens, it's either A, on the upside, it seems like we get better marketing, we buy bicycles that are more interesting to us and better suited for our applications. Or B, it's like the biggest existential threat that's ever faced humanity, right? I mean, it's not benign. And so, it just, I guess I'd love to hear more about why you think that that's not possible, or maybe why some people think that that's not possible. And if it is possible, why aren't people literally running around with their hair on fire, trying to figure out how to prevent this?
I don't know how to really answer that question. I'm not, obviously, this is just the research that I did for this presentation, is figuring out like, what do scientists think is possible as far as AGI? And you get so many different answers. You know, like some people, like I said, were saying it's never gonna happen. But I think everyone has a different definition of what AGI is. So is there always gonna be human intervention to make that AGI better? Or is it be completely sentient, which means it will be making decisions without human intervention at all? And if that's the case, then yeah, it is kind of scary.
What type of regulation were you interested in? Like how do you think, or what is being like discussed, how do you think that's gonna change what we have now?
You mean through regulation?
Yeah, the regulation, like how do you think that's gonna be like, what is that gonna be?
Well, from what I've researched, the Biden administration already has someone that wrote up bylines and guidelines for artificial intelligence. And that those are already being looked at. And I think one of the things they were talking about was to make sure that there's always some kind of control mechanism in there, that humans will always have control over it, you know, ultimately. But I don't know all the details in it. All that I know is that they have written something up. So it is coming to fruition. Yeah.
How far along towards AGI would you say auto GPT is? Does your industry use it at all?
How far along is?
Auto GPT. Do you know what that is? It's basically just Python and JavaScript, and then you put the GPT model into that, and it can just talk to itself.
Right.
Do the whole task for you. You give it like 5 rules.
Yeah.
And put it in continuous mode, and it will just go until your whole task is done.
Yeah, so they talked about that at the Google I/O last week, about how it is programmed or knows up to 10 programming languages, including Python, SQL, and all of those. So yeah, I can help you write programs, code, all of that stuff. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And it can do it in all these different languages. It's crazy.
How do you think, this is for both of you guys, how do you think that the metaverse and just AI in general can help develop like neuromarketing, consumer behavior research, and like how have you seen that happen?
Neuromarketing, what was the second one?
Like just consumer behavior research.
Well, I think all the models that are in place for standard digital marketing need to be thought about differently for this new environment, none of which have been applied yet, right? And so I think I think there's going to be an evolution in those metrics. First of all, the standards need to be put in place by which you then measure those activities. I think that there are tremendous advantages of healthcare and life sciences are one of the biggest, I think, activators of this space. And will be able to be leveraged. The AI component, I think, is really, really big as it applies because your experience needs to be different than your experience than mine. And the content for those circumstances can be developed by the AI tools eventually, but it needs to have all the governance and all the restrictions or all the elements in place to help put the restrictions in place. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
I don't know if you agree or
No,
not.
I agree.
I was just wondering, do marketers understand how to use the conversational generative AI? I'm assuming it also be voice, not just type. So let's say, I don't know, if someone were to query, find me the best mortgage rate, or I'm feeling ill and these are my symptoms, or I was just wondering how, and is there any, I don't want to say control, what if you want to show up as having a good mortgage rate if you're, Discover Card, or if you're Abbott, you want to sell your Pedialyte. How do we, it's great that this is a great tool, there's that inquiry, is there anything as a marketer that you're advising or using this as a tool other than maybe you can tell by your analytics that they came from a conversation or, from a chat GPT, is there anything we can do or?
You mean how they're gonna integrate marketing and advertising into the responses that ChatGPT and Bard are putting out?
I guess so, I just, I understand there is this tool.
That's the big question. Right, how is it gonna integrate in if I'm paying for my ad to run in search? How do I get it into or make it show up or somehow have it show up on those responses?
Or even those that aren't paying for search, say I'm not advertising HELOCs right now, or I don't know, the Capital One credit card or whatever it is, you may not be even necessarily paying advertising, but how are you measuring them? Or using this tool?
Yeah, I have the same questions too. I know that Bing, when it answers a question, it will actually give you links to go from that answer to a website. So they are integrating in different links in that response. So I think that that's how they're gonna do it. But then you have to think about, okay, is that organic or is someone paying to put that there? So you don't really know, and that's, I think, where disclosure comes in.
And will that be transparent to the user?
Right, will that be transparent? That's a good question.
Will it still be TBD? Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know how it's gonna be integrated at this point. Google has a big event called Google Marketing Live. It's gonna be next Tuesday. If you guys want to tune in, they're gonna start revealing how they're going to use or integrate Bard into search. And I think maybe they'll answer some of those questions. I'm hoping they do. Yeah.
Question over here.
Yeah, right here. So I do have one interesting question here. When it comes to AI and marketing, it was made clear to me in my Business 101 course that marketers, 90% of the information that they have used has been collected since 2010. So the basis of marketing and AI itself is centralization of information. Right, and I remember let's call it 2-3 years ago when we had the big crypto boom. A big word that you might have heard popping up so often was decentralization. If the idea of decentralization of information and stuff like that is more apparent and used in consumers' lives, how does AI marketing shift? Because now you've kind of decentralized information.
Yeah, so you're saying that the information is not, you're not gonna go to
a specific website to get the information, that the information's all going to be there in front of you. And you don't need to go outside of that response from ChatGPT or Bard. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Google's been going in that direction with no-click responses, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Or
their
kind of going-
their responses will come out in like either a paragraph form or however you want to see it. But my issue with it is disclosure. I want to know where that information came from. And I want it to give me sources and links. I got this information from here, I got this information from here, so that I can go and do my fact checking. Because that's exactly what I want to do, I want to fact check it. So that remains to be seen if they're going to put those types of measures in place. And I think with the regulation, I think that that's what they're trying to do, is tell them, you need to tell us where you got this response from.
So a couple things that I noticed, and I really appreciated your joke at the beginning about saying that this was gonna be outdated before it ends. So Bard, I was doing an app search, and I said, give me an open source app for AI for interior design, and go, So it responded back and it gave me the full code, what it would do, how you could load it up, and then also gave me sources down at the bottom. So it depends on what you're searching for, because if you also search for what are the best mortgage rates in Chicago, Bard will give you 3 different responses, and in those 3 different responses, they'll give you different companies in the area where you can get those mortgages from, but the mortgage rates are set by Fed, so it doesn't matter where you're going, you're gonna get the same rates. So within that, I think transparency, what I've, to your point, I think is where this question comes from, is like, my assumption is Google is auto-generating these responses and these companies from their total algorithm, right? Say, hey, this is gonna be our search order, so if you're top of the list, this is our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you have 3 different responses that are giving you all different mortgage companies. And the third response is probably page 3 of Google in terms of response, but it doesn't give you at the bottom of that to say, this is how our algorithm performs, which I think is what you're saying in terms of how does this come back? And I think the transparency between whether you're using Lex powered by GPT or whatever, having that understanding where that information is coming back from. Yes, sourcing is happening in Bard and in other areas, but it's not explaining the totality of where that search resolution is coming from. And to the point of national security that happened back there, I think that the one thing that was really interesting about Curt's presentation is the discussion of somebody being in a workplace and needing to know a procedure. Well, what happens when that data is leaked, that sensitive information from Abbott Laboratories is now a video feed that whoever, the Chinese, whatever, North Korea, whatever the players may be, where does that stop? And how do we make sure that the government actually is doing the right thing by us in terms of octogenarians looking at something that they have no idea what they're looking at? How do we make sure that we have the right guardrails?
Can I just jump in? One of your slides had Epic as a tool, right?
Epic.
So I'm familiar with Epic from a user experience standpoint, because to help up-level a patient experience, it collects all of this data, right? But the data, if you think about it, it's not just useful for the patient, it's useful for the nurses, it's useful for, to share that information across to the surgeons, to whatever staff, it's operations, where do I need the beds for this day? And a lot of the things that we ran into, and I was working with a hospital group in St. Louis, was all the HIPAA stuff that we had to circumvent. And it wasn't really circumvent, we were trying to make our case. And it was just all of the regulatory steps that we needed to pull in place. Same thing, different scale, totally different scale, but the same type of exposure that could happen, right? Unnecessarily.
Right.
So
So you're saying HIPAA gave you guardrails?
Right.
Right. mean, that doesn't exist right now for
Doesn't.
social or.
Doesn't exist.
AI.
It's just like the early days of social media where they just let them go, you know? Facebook just went and did stuff. Twitter just went and did stuff. And if they do that now, it'd be the same thing. Bad things are gonna happen. Especially now, this is even more powerful than I think social media networks were.
You touched a little bit on like copyright and, you know, who owns, you know, the article, and being a marketer, right? You work, probably do direct buys too. Do you have a gauge of what the publishers, if they're talking about, hey, these LLMs are scraping our website?
That's right, yeah.
Are they having
Reddit
those
already did that. They
conversations?
said, okay, if you're gonna use all of our data on Reddit, we wanna be paid for it. That's, you can't just take it, scrape it, and feed it into your LLM, and then it uses it to generate responses. You know, we expect to be paid for that. That's our intellectual property. We own all the information, or we own the platform that has the information on it. So that's still a huge issue. You're right.
Gotcha, but like as far as the publishers go, are they talking about that apart from?
They are,
Reddit?
yeah. Yeah, if I was in New York Times and you were using my data and my journalist wrote that data, yeah, I wanna be compensated for it.
Yeah, but if you're on like Reddit and if I post information that I found somewhere else and I post it on there, is that private? Does that make me a private like journalist or whatever when I post it there and like a company wants to take my information? I mean, sure, I see where I wanna get paid, but it's not like he's signing up as a journalist, as a private journalist, has a company as a journalist, and then like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But as an owned entity, yeah.
As
Because
Reddit.
you're talking intellectual property versus a user of the platform. So I work for a publisher. I've worked for my last 2 jobs were with publishers as well, and I'm on their data and ops side of things. And we 100% have those conversations on the daily. Google, Facebook, anybody that wants user verification comes to us to talk about it because we're collecting credit cards from where they live, we know what they're reading, and then we talk about like what the privacy situation should be. But I mean, everything is focusing around clean rooms, making sure that we are using the data in a manner that is not going to land us on John Oliver.
Your question up there?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. There was a question about regulations and stuff. I work as a privacy analyst, right? So for anybody that are curious about it, I would start with like basic regulations like GDPR, CCPA, knowing where your consumer is, knowing where your client is. You start with those regulations and those policies. So you know who's controller, who's really owning the data, who is the processor, who's processing the data. So if you know those basics, then you know you can advance to all other policies. I don't know if you saw, like there was an article, Italy banned ChatGPT, I don't know where it is right now. But like all those things are being, like Europe has different regulations and different controls how we deal with that versus US, because United Nations, we don't have enough office regulations to cover, you know, all the privacy needs. Like I work for fintech, right? When you mentioned Finland, I'm like, okay, I know a couple of things about it. So, you know, when you work in marketing, it's a lot of things cool. We collect the data, you know, we wanna create models and many other things. But we really have to think about the consumer's data. What do you do? Because I own my data, I don't know if you wanna, if I'm allowing you to use my data for any other things. Another thing, maybe to look into like privacy policies and privacy notices, where explicitly it is listed like what tools that companies using, how we're gonna be processing the data. But that's, I would say 5-10 years maybe from now until really it's well documented that companies pay attention. So just some of you that are curious about speculating.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. I think the EU is far way better at privacy than the US is. It's a wild, wild west, right? Your data is getting bought and sold every second. And in the EU, there's a lot more regulations with GDPR and all of those things. California is really the only one that put something in place for privacy.
And like when you mentioned Twitter, you know, if you work in finance company, like I work partnership by yourselves, right? We go for contracts and PPAs and stuff, like you have to inform your client what tools will be using to access your data, So, just being transparent. I would recommend for everyone start with GDPR, just take a casual read through it.
Right, we're done? Okay.
Thanks again to Curt and Mar for actually researching this, putting a presentation together. My name is Gage Berry. I'm on the board with so many of the other board members of SEMA who are here today. If you are a student, I think you are so lucky to be being at the birth of this and just having it sort of be second nature to you. For many of us, we're 10, 20 years into our career and we're having to learn this stuff. I think it's very lucky that you're gonna be playing with this and we're all gonna be going to these sort of talks to learn about it. So if you are a student, on your way out, join SEMA, it's free. We send out just one weekly email that just lets you know our 3 upcoming events. We do everything from fun socials to these educational events. We've got a golf outing, a huge summer boat cruise coming up, and then our holiday party at the end of the year is pretty infamous and a fun time. So thank you so much for coming out. If you can stick around, more of this discussion can go on. We can talk about this, we can network and connect. So if you follow us on LinkedIn, our Instagram, our YouTube, we're gonna be cutting snippets of this, highlights. So just follow us where you can, stay involved because coming out of COVID, SEMA's trying to do something every month, trying to do something every quarter. So we're really excited to be here at DePaul. Thank you so much for hosting us. This was really an event where the students got to really flex their muscle, plan everything. We're just excited to work with the greater Chicagoland. So thank you, everyone, and see you.
Happy hour right outside.
Yes, if you can stay, there is a happy hour from starting now.
Yep.
And we'll see you out there. So.
All right. And I have no idea how we got it.
Yeah, thanks for getting me up.
That's the problem we have, trying to figure out how to get it back.
Oh, man. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm so happy to have looked up.
Thank you.